السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله. Last time we started with Kitab al-Iman Billah, and we've gone through the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how does this affect the life of a Muslim in his worship and in his whole actually life, not only العبادات كما قال تعالى قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين. And beforehand we come to an introduction with the meaning of Aqidah and belief in Islam and the Iman in general, and the value of Iman in Islam, and how this differs between the Islamic philosophy, if you're allowed to say, or Islamic Aqidah, and the modern philosophy, and the atheists, and the meaning of knowing the proper values of Islam and the Aqidah, and the difference between this and between the atheism, as to be able to respond to those people, so that a Muslim, by his native fitrah, he doesn't need actually to argue with these things, but you need to understand so that you can be able to negotiate with people, or you can tackle these things with others, non-Muslim. Likewise, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, وَلَا تُجَادِلُوا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ، أو كما قال سبحانه وتعالى وَجَادِلُهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ, which means that you would argue them in the best way, or in the proper way, or in the good way. And that's why we came to these arguments, and how it is meaningless, and how we should defeat these arguments. How we should defeat these arguments with atheism and those types of people. Then we started to have a look in some of these initial chapters in the belief of Allah. We came to the chapter 1, which was the evidence of the existence of Allah as a creator. And these things we need to know by ourselves, so that it should be there all the time. I mean, any Muslim doesn't need to hardly know the evidence for the existence of the Creator, because it's in there in his heart. But in a mindly way, you need to know it, so that you can repeat it each time and every time, and you can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by reappraising these things for yourself and for other people. And this is the way of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned this in the verses of the Quran, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا لَا تَبْدِيلَ لِخَلْقِ اللَّهِ ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ, which means, so set you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, your face toward the religion, which is the pure Islamic monotheism, Hanif, which worship none but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. This is Allah's fitrah, which is the Allah Islamic monotheism, with which He has created mankind. No change. Let there be in the Khalq-illah, the religion of Allah, or the Islamic monotheism. This is the straight religion. So this is a fitrah, and it's a phenomena that has been noted by those who research in the history of religions, that all nations whose history has been studied have adopted gods which they have turned to and venerated. I mean, as they used to say it in a kufr way, those philosophers, they used to say, ad-din afyun al-shurub, or religion is the opium of the nations, which is, of course, kufr. Ad-din is hayat al-shurub. Religion is the life of the nations. Because without religion, you're not alive. I mean, many people are bodies, and they have breathe in and out, and they have beating hearts, but they are dead. I mean, what is the meaning of your existence in this world if you don't know who did create you, and why you was created to, and what are you going to face after you finish your life here, and how to prepare yourself for the thereafter? So what is the meaning for your existence? I mean, what is the meaning for your existence in the faculty of medicine if you're not aware by why you're here, what are you doing now, and what's your prospect after you graduate? So you're spending time in nonsense. So this is the whole thing. It's not the 6 or 7 years of the faculty. It's your whole life. Why you're here, and what are you doing? Who did create you? What did he ask out of you? And what are you going to face afterward? And how to survive this? There's nothing of meaning in this world if you don't know the answer of these questions. So, by the fitrah, everyone usually look for the creator. But if you leave a person for his own fitrah, he would know that the creator is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He might not know the characters and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the beautiful deeds of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he would know that there is a single creator and he would know that he is up there, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even the child, even every one of us, when he had a hard time, you would go up with your eyes and you would raise your hands up. Even the disbelievers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that وَإِذَا مَسَّهُمُ الضُّرُّ فِي الْبَحْرِ ضَلَّ مَنْ يَدْعُونَ إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ ضَلَّ وَإِذَا مَسَّكُمُ الضُّرُّ فِي الْبَحْرِ ضَلَّ مَنْ تَدْعُونَ إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ. When you have a harm and a danger in the sea, you lose anyone that you are asking except him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the nature of the human being. This is the fitrah, and this is the evidence from the fitrah. Then there are evidence from the shara, from the deen. And this is the most important thing. People used to use a proverb in Arabic language, which is, they usually say, رَبِّنَا عِرْفُوا بِالْعَقْلِ. You know the meaning? When they want to have giving an example to how you should use your mind to understand things and reason things, they would say that people know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the mind. So you need to use your mind. You should use your mind to know everything around you, which is a wrong proverb. Because we never knew Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the mind. We only know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the deen, by the religion, by the verses of Allah and the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Else we would never come to know him. I mean, where in the mind you can find that you understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Malik Yawm al-Din, the Lord of the Day of Judgment. Where in the mind you can know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has two hands and that both his hands are right hands. These are characters from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in Hadith al-Bukhari, إن الله يبسط يداه بالليل ليتوب مسيء النهار ويبسط يديه بالنهار ليتوب مسيء الليل. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would expand his hands by the night so that the man who did a wrong thing in the morning or in the daytime, so that he makes tawbah, and in the morning so that he expands his hands subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that the man or the person who did a wrong deed in the morning make, or the night time make the tawbah in the daytime, and so forth. How would you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes down from the throne to the first level of the sky or the heaven each night? Of course, we don't know how he comes down, subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a downcome in the way that suits Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not like in a stair or an elevator or in a rocket or in a plane or in anything that you can imagine, because we cannot imagine. We can just know that he comes down, subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the last third of each night. And he tells the people who is awake to يستغفر فأغفر له, يطلب فأعطيه, يسأل فأعطيه, would ask and I would give him, so and so forth. And this is each night. How come that we can know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the day of the judgment, he would have the sea on one finger, the trees on a finger, the sky on a finger, and the mountains on a finger, and the land, the whole earth on a finger, and he would say subhanahu wa ta'ala, لمن الملك اليوم, for whom is today, for whom is the governance or the kingdom today? And no one would answer. So he would answer himself subhanahu wa ta'ala, لله الواحد القهار. How come that we know all this? You can never know these characters, these attributes, unless you had an evidence for that from the Shara. Your mind is different from mine, and our minds as the doctors is different from the set of the mind of the engineers, which is totally different from the set of the mind of the philosophers, or those who study English literature or Arabic literature, which is totally different from those illiterate, and so forth and so on. So if it is our minds, each one would make to himself an idol to worship, and it wouldn't be the Lord. So it is only one God, only one Lord, with his own character that we can never come to know except through the Shara and not by the Aql. So the proper saying is Rabbina, our Lord, عرفوه, they know him by the Shara, by the Sharia, by the Deen, by the Hadith and the verses of the Quran, and not by the Aql. Okay? So this is an important point that we should come to understand, that and this is the best way to study Tawheed. And this is the best way to tell people about Aqidah and about Islam. The best book ever, yarhamukallah, the best book ever to tell people about Islam is the Quran. I mean, sometimes we look for small flyers and books that is written in a good way and just describing Islam, and maybe you look for the scientific miracles, or you do look for the social miracles and the financial and these things, but it's always ever the best thing is just give him a translation of the Quran. However, you would think this might be difficult in comprehending, or that he would not understand the whole meaning, or that it would contain things that is difficult to be mentioned for a non-Muslim. Don't ever think so. Don't ever think that, how should I give him ayat about al-jihad, when he is not Muslim yet he will say that we are terrorists. How should I give him ayat about how a person should come to his wife in Islam? You would say, what? You're telling me about Islam by this way? This is no. Don't ever think so. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made this deen muhkam. You know the meaning of muhkam is tightened. Is that you cannot find the hole or a defect or a place that you can come through to tear it away or to make it. So never think that there is something in the Quran that you want not to let the person know that you are making da'wah for him to Islam. So it's always, you know the story of this man who had a version of Quran from one of his friends. He gave him a version of translation of Quran. He was an American or English guy. Yeah, I think it's English guy. And when he gave him that version, he took it and he just popped it in the he just pop it in the library. He never go through it. So he never go through that version. And one day he was just getting his books tidy and arranging them. So he found that copy of the Quran. He just opened it up. And it happened that he looks at Surah Al-Qamar, the moon. And Surah Al-Qamar, in the very first verses, anyone recall the verses of Surah Al-Qamar? Surah the moon, Al-Qamar. It says اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. اقتربت الساعة, the day of judgment is coming, is near or is soon. وانشق القمر, and the moon have been split into halves. This is the meaning of انشق القمر. And this is a verse that or a miracle that happened by the time of the Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where the disbeliever in Quraysh asked him for a miracle. So he told them, what miracle do you want to see? They told him, make the qamar two halves. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala split the qamar, the moon, into two halves, so that they can see the mountain between the two halves of the moon. So the man said, just look, this is the evidence for what I'm saying. The man said, what nonsense is that? how could the moon split into two parts? Then he closed the book and he put it back. Years later, the man was just watching a program, a TV show, talk show, and it was interrogating a scientist from NASA. And the theme of the TV show was how much did the NASA spend on the research of the outer space, and what is the benefit back to the US nation from this. So the man was defending the expenses that they have spent. And this scientist said, we came to know that the moon in the old times have been split into two halves because we found a midline in the moon that is made from a collision between rocks that can never be like this unless they were apart and then they came to join again. And then the man jumped. He was watching that TV show, he jumped away and he remembered the verse of Quran. And he said, oh, could it be that NASA spent this whole money to prove what is written there in the Quran 14 years back, and he became a Muslim. I mean, it's just an example of an odd beginning to Islam. Although, of course, you can argue saying, well, he could have not heard this program and he would remain a disbeliever. It's not you. It is the guidance of Allah that you just, the reason, you give the reason. But it is the guidance of Allah. This man was really looking for the right thing. That's why Allah guided him to the proper way. If he's another way, he would never have been guided. I mean, so just believing that the Quran is the best way to make da'wah, just as simple as it. Just read any page of the Quran. Just give any translation of the Quran in the simplest language possible. After all, this is the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to spoke out to his creations or his slaves. So you can never spoke better than this. So the initial evidence for the existence of Allah is the Fitrah, and the second evidence is the Sharia. And then it comes to the mind. Well, yes, you can, of course, use the mind to prove the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is very simple. But this is not the way of Islam. Even you can use the mind, you can give examples for the mind, the way that the Quran used. Look for that. When Jubayr ibn Mut'im, he came, he was not a Muslim yet. And he came to the Medina. And he entered to the Medina when the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims were praying Salatul Maghrib. And he came and he stand behind the rows of the Salah and start to hear the Prophet ﷺ. He was reciting Surah At-Tur. والطور وكتاب مسطور في رق منشور والبيت المعمور والسقف المرفوع والبحر المسجور. to the end of the surah, the Prophet ﷺ was reciting the verses. Jubayr ibn Mut'am, he was not a Muslim yet, he was a disbeliever. He said, till the Prophet ﷺ reached the verse saying, أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ أَمْ خَلَقُوا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ بَلْ لَا يُوقِنُونَ. He said, فَكَادَ قَلْبِي أَنْ يَنْخَلَعَ. He was a disbeliever. He heard the Prophet ﷺ reciting the surah saying, أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ, or they have been created without a creator. أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ, or they are the creators. أَمْ خَلَقُوا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, or did they create the heaven and the earth? He said, my heart was about to come out of my body from the strength of the heart beatings when he heard these words. A disbeliever, just the verses of Quran, very short verses in Arabic language, just 6 words or 7 words. أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ. Just imagine, you have nothing better than this short verse to argue with an atheist. Are you there without a finder? Then you can put and add from the mind. Then you accept that this table has no carpenter to put it. And these all examples that you know. So now, if you believe that you can be here by chance, so just let your baby come by chance. Never go to have intercourse with your wife, and it will come by chance. If you believe that you are here by chance, they're going to be fed and fight your thirst by chance. Don't eat or drink. It will come by chance. I mean, it's much easier to quench your thirst by chance than of creating yourself by chance. So there is no need to drink, and it will come by chance. But don't go into these details. It's just أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ. So even when you use the mind as an evidence for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, use it the way that the Quran uses it. Don't use it your way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَلَا تَضْرِبُوا لِلَّهِ الْأَمْثَالِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. This is very, very, very magnificent verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَلَا تَضْرِبُوا لِلَّهِ الْأَمْثَالِ. Don't give examples for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, and you don't know. So use the example that Allah used. You don't need to have your examples. Use those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used. So in the Quran, you would find your sufficiency for yourself, for convincing other people, for talking to atheists, for talking to Christian, for talking to a Jew, for talking to an illiterate, and for talking to a PhD laureate. You can do all by reciting the verses of Quran. So, no better proof for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the Quran, or more than the Quran. Then it comes a point. We knew people who heard Quran, but they turned away Islam. And we knew people who argued with the verses of Quran. So it come here a shubha. I need to convince him. So I might use a simple words, or I might use another way. You should never think this way, because you can never be more explanatory, more eloquent, more effective, more convincing, more anything than the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The problem is not in the medicine. The problem is in the patient. Right? Sometimes you can use the medicine and you have no effect. Not because the medicine is ineffective, but because the patient had a problem. He's not absorbing the drug, he's not, the pharmacodynamics in his body is altered, he's a rapid acylator, slow acylator. These examples that you know. So it is not the issue of the medicine. It is the same. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَمَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ أَنْ يَهْدِيَهُ يَشْرَحْ صَدْرَهُ لِلْإِسْلَامِ وَمَنْ يُرِدْ أَنْ يُضِلَّهُ يَجْعَلْ صَدْرَهُ ضَيِّقًا حَرَجًا كَأَنَّمَا يَصَّعَّدُ فِي السَّمَاءِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted him to be guided, He would make his chest wider and comfortable to the Islam, so that when you tell him about Islam, he feel comfort, he feel satisfaction, he feel rest. وَمَنْ يُرِدَ يُضِلَّهُ, and those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want to not to guide him or to let him go astray, يَجْعَلْ صَدْرَهُ ضَيِّقًا حَرَجًا, He would subhanahu wa ta'ala make his chest tight and narrow, as if he is escalating in the skies or in the heaven. You know, when you go uphill, you have tightened chests and you have less oxygen. And subhanAllah, this is another miracle that describes how much when you go up, you would have these tighter chests. So, it is not your job to convince people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said this to the Prophet himself sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ أَلَّا يَكُونُوا مُؤْمِنِينَ. As if, oh you Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, you're blaming yourself or you're taking yourself too much hard after them, that they are not believing you or that they are not turning to believers. It is not your job. Your job is to tell them, to guide them, the guidance of the telling or the explanation, but the guidance of at-tawfiq, the guidance of to take their hand, to allow them to be, is only in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why there are two types of guidance. The guidance by the knowledge, and this is the role of the prophets and the Rusul and of the righteous people afterward, to tell the people what's right and what's wrong. This is a time of the guidance of the knowledge. But the guidance of the actual doing is only in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He can turn a heart toward the right way or away from the right way. القلوب بين إصبعين من أصابع الرحمن. Hearts are between the two fingers, from the fingers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, we come to the other part that we mentioned last time as well, which is, if we're allowed to say the word which is not in the actual meaning, the definition of Allah and connecting the hearts to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we've mentioned the last time, this is the most important for us as a Muslim, for ourselves. The previous part is an essential knowledge that you should know to practice with non-Muslims. And you should know how to use the proper way to practice with non-Muslims. Okay? It's like when you're a doctor, you should know how to use your tools to treat people. Okay? But now, we're tackling how to treat yourself, not to treat others, which is, after all, the most important. You should know that any person, when it comes to the heaven, when it comes to the paradise and the hellfire, you should be the most and the extreme selfish person. Again, if every single person on the world got to the hellfire and you got to the paradise, you would never care. You would never ask, no, don't let me alone, let me go with them. You understand? Even if these were your own family, your parents or your children, your wife or your brother, and you know the verses in the Quran. So, when it comes to the Jannah and the Nar, you are the most selfish person. Well, actually, we like others to go to the Jannah because this increased our asset to go to the Jannah. The main reason that we like others to go to the Jannah, that every single good deed a person would do after I'm telling him, I would have a credit for it. So this is after all, it's of no meaning to let others go to the Jannah and you don't. This is nonsense. So that's why this is the most important thing, is to connect your heart to Allah. And of course, when you're able to do so, you can connect other people's hearts to Allah. And to connect your heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you need to know Him. You need to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His names and attributes. You need to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His good deeds, in His bounties and blessings upon us, and in His beneficiaries to the world, the whole world. See, we have already stated that the Quran tackles this issue, which is connecting the heart to Allah, in two ways to confirm this great reality. First, it speaks of the perfection of Allah's creation and describes the wonders of the universe, which indicate the greatness of the Creator. Second, it speaks directly of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the exalted. His essence, names, attributes, blessings, creations. He says we shall endeavor, inshallah, to discuss this in details. Of course, when we speak about the evidence of the universal signs which point to the Creator, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the initiator, just many verses. Again, look back at the Quran. Many verses in the Quran telling you about the universe, about yourself, about the skies, about the earth, about the mountain, about the seas, about the creatures, about the bee, about the ants, about the horses, the mules and the donkeys, about the ships in the sea and how they go. Just imagine, you can just work your mind up and remember the verses of the Quran. The sun, the moon, the wind, the rain, the sky, everything. You would imagine the babies, the creations, the stages of the creation of the babies in the womb of the mother. Just think it over. Think it over in the two directions. In the minute microscopic and submicroscopic and in the nano and the femto and whatever is below this in the size, and in the mega and the giga and the tera and the whatever is above this in the size. You can never count in your mind how vast is this universe and what is the number of the planets over there, or the numbers of the suns or the moons or the other planets over there, or the stars over there, the distance or the sound and the velocity and the light and its velocity, and how vast is this universe, how expanding it is, and how minute and how tiny is the mitochondria in your cell that you cannot live without. And then God did fix all these things. Just imagine when you have the screw of your eyepiece away and you need to tighten it. Just imagine what much hustle you're in, and you need special screwdriver, and you need to wear another magnificent lens, magnifying lens, so that you can see it, and you then can you screw it in. Just for a thing like this, and it's not even automated, or it doesn't run by itself, or just imagine if you want to have a huge building or a huge twin tower like yours in Kuala or whatever, and how much is it, and how you can